lay in their nest at a time. So, ilang eggs daw yun, guys? 10 to 20 ba? 50 to 75? Ayan, 100 to 125 eggs. So sea turtles lay their eggs in a nest. They dig in the sand with their rear flippers. The group of eggs is called a clutch. They usually lay 100 to 125 eggs per nest and will nest multiple times, about 2 weeks apart, over several months. As soon as the eggs hatch, roughly 2 months later, the hatchlings dig out of their nests. This process that generally takes a few days. Once they emerge, the tiny turtles hurry to the sea and make their way offshore into the open ocean. Sea turtles face many threats, but those that survive to become adults are decades old. So yung trivia about turtles, sea turtles. Next, sige, Ambriel.
Okay, for our next question. For this round, si Mary pala yung naka-top 1. The temperature dictates the sex of sea turtles. True or false? So medyo mabilis yung mga participants natin for this one kasi 2 options lang. Correct answer is true. Congratulations to the 37 who got it right. Sand temperature is very important because the sex of sea turtles, like many other turtles, is determined by the temperature in the nest. Cooler incubation temperatures produce male hatchlings, and warmer incubation temperatures produce female hatchlings. Temperatures that fluctuate between the two extremes will produce a mix of male and female hatchlings.
Ayun, congrats, Mary. Okay, for the next question. This type of turtles use their beaks to help extract their favorite prey. Okay? Sige, sagot. Anong turtle daw use their beaks? Yes, yes. Okay, the correct answer is hawksbill turtles. So hawksbill turtles yun, guys. They use their beaks to help extract their favorite prey. Hawksbill turtles are typically found on coral reefs, which are home to their preferred food, sponges. The shape and sharpness of their beak enables them to reach into the small holes and crevices in coral reefs to find food. So, new knowledge na naman na-gain ko. Congrats, Mary! Hey!
Top student talaga yan si Mary. So halfway there, one sea turtle, I always mix it up. Sea turtle species nest during the day. Okay. Are the only sea turtles that routinely nest during the day. Kemp's Ridleys. So 34 got it correct. It's true. One sea turtle species nests during the day. Most sea turtles nest at night. Kemp Ridleys are the only sea turtles that routinely nest during the day.
Yan. Nox, Mary! Gagaling niya naman, guys. Next, true or false? Leatherback sea turtles have existed since the age of the dinosaurs. True or false ba yan? Grabe, halos lahat ng tanong hindi ko alam yung sagot. So, hula-hula na lang. Pero for sure, si Mary, pinag-aralan niya talaga yung mga turtles. Sure ako doon.
Honor student yan si Mary.
Yeah. Ayan, true. Grabe, 39. So, leatherback sea turtles have existed in their current form since the age of the dinosaurs. So leatherbacks are highly migratory, some swimming more than 10,000 miles a year between nesting and foraging grounds. They are also accomplished divers, with the deepest recorded dive reaching nearly 4,000 feet, deeper than most marine mammals. So, wow, grabe naman yun. Pagkatapos si Mary ulit. Ate Mary, share your blessings mamaya. Charing. Nakamute ka, April.
Oh, sorry. So how many years of their lives do loggerheads spend in the open ocean? 7 to 15 years, 1 to 6 years, 16 to 20 years, or all throughout their lifetime? So the correct answer is 7 to 15 years lang. This is the first time na super onti lang nakakuha ng correct answer. But yes, loggerheads spend the first 7 to 15 years, or average of 12 years, of their lives in the open ocean. Then they migrate to nearshore coastal areas where they continue to grow and mature. Through satellite tracking, researchers have discovered that loggerheads in the Pacific have a highly migratory life stage. Hatchlings enter the ocean from nesting beaches in Japan and Australia.
Ayan, malapit na tayo matapos guys, so galingan nyo. Kaya nyo pa yung habulin si Ate Mary. Okay, sea turtles can retract into their shells. True or false? So, nagre-retract ba sila sa shell nila? True or false? Marami kaya makakatama. So, the correct answer is false. So, wow. Mabuti alam nyo guys. May points palalo. So sea turtles don't retract into their shells. So unlike other turtles, sea turtles cannot retract their flippers and head into their shells. Their streamlined shells and large paddle-shaped flippers make them very agile and graceful swimmers. So in the water, their rear flippers are used as rudders for steering. So ayan. Next.
Staying strong yung tropa nating si Mary. Top 1 pa rin. So for our 9th question, some turtles nest in large groups called arribada, Spanish for arrival. Which sea turtles display this behavior? The correct answer is Kemp's Ridley sea turtles and olive Ridley sea turtles. So some turtles nest in large groups called arribadas, Spanish for arrival, and only the two Ridley turtles and Kemp's Ridley and the olive Ridley display this arribada nesting behavior. During an arribada, large groups of females gather offshore and come onto the beach to nest in large numbers, generally over a period of several hours.
Okay, for the last question, sea turtles are shallow divers and can stay underwater for short periods of time. True or false? Shallow divers pa sila. Ba't mo sinasabi yung sagot, Kuya Jetro? Joke. False! Wow! Yan. False yung sagot, guys. So, sea turtles are deep divers and can stay underwater for long periods of time. As reptiles, sea turtles breathe air, but they have the ability, under natural conditions, to remain submerged for hours at a time. They even sleep underwater. Most sea turtles spend their entire life at sea, only returning to nesting beaches to lay eggs. However, in the Pacific Islands, green turtles often come ashore to bask on the beach. So, wow, sino na kaya yung winner? Ano yung last question? Congrats, James. Next naman is si Lex. And ang panalo talaga ay si Ate Mary.
Congratulations, everyone! Sobrang expected naman natin na si Mary yung magiging top 1. Siya yung tipong kaklase natin na parating nag-aaral, parating handa, and favorite ng teacher. Ang sarap niyan katabi. Gusto ko siya
Katabi for what purposes?
Siyempre, mapaturo. And if you want to claim your prizes, kindly message the tech booth. You could find them in the participants and look for the one named tech booth. Or you could also message the PBI Facebook page. So message them with your contact details, screenshot of your place in Kahoot, and that's it. You will get your Gcash prize. Once again, thank you to everyone who participated, and congratulations to our top 3. Congratulations, Mary, Lex, and James.
And congrats, guys. So, I hope may natutunan din kayo sa Kahoot. May mga trivia din yun. And now, for the time we've all been waiting for. Our speaker has been involved in marine conservation management for most of his professional life, specifically with the DENR and WWF Philippines. He is also the founder and executive director of the Marine Wildlife Watch of the Philippines, MWWP.
Furthermore, he studied tropical aquatic ecology at the University of Bremen, Germany, and is currently working on a research project which focuses on rays and skates. He has also been involved in dugong conservation, works on cetaceans, and shark conservation through a study on the whale shark fishery back in 1996.
Finally, he has worked in the Turtle Islands as well, which is also known as the biggest rookery for green turtles in Southeast Asia. Without further ado, let us all welcome Dr. Arnel A.A. Yaptinchai.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for having me to do this talk this afternoon. I'm so happy that a lot of you are interested in marine turtles and pawikan. And based on the game earlier, I don't think you need this type of lecture anymore. I feel like you know everything already. Actually, I want to ask Mary to just do the presentation instead of me. I'm just kidding. But yeah, so let me start my presentation. So, okay, we're talking about the humble turtle. I would say knowledge is very important in terms of when we want to conserve species. I work for an NGO who advocates for the conservation of marine biodiversity. And the turtle is one of the species we're focusing on based on how important it is to our ecosystem and the Philippine seas. But usually none of us or very few of us do understand how important they are in our lives, how important they are to the environment, how important they are to the ecosystem. So I guess that's my goal today for this talk, is to increase your appreciation to the humble marine turtle. So let me start this. So let me clarify. I always encounter people confusing the terms. Either they use turtle, tortoise, or terrapin, or in Tagalog, pawikan and pagong. So I saw this graphic online. It just shows you the right terminology for the different types of turtle. So when we usually talk about land turtle, and when you look at the illustration on the right, it shows you that the legs and the foot of the turtle is made for walking on land. So what we call these types of turtles would usually be the tortoise. So they are exclusively land-dwelling animals. So I had cases before when people would ask, they've seen a tortoise and they want to release it back. They ask me if they can just throw it back into the sea or a body of water. So they live exclusively on land, is the tortoise. As you can see also, it depends on the country where you come from or the English speaking country, what terminology is used. We have an amphibious uh, reptile, which we call terrapin. So these turtles usually would have webbed feet, as shown in illustration B. So it's like the foot of a duck. It has a web because this facilitates swimming and together with walking on land. Okay, so these turtles are usually called terrapins. Okay, and finally we have our flipper-like legs or foot of a turtle, and this would refer to our marine turtles. And there's confusion always what to use, marine turtle or sea turtle. In the Philippines, I tend to use marine turtles because in our Republic Acts and our law, that's the official terminology used. But for example, if you Google online, you'll see mostly sea turtle, which is what is used mostly in the United States, for example. But in some, or as you can see in all of these places, just the term turtle would immediately refer to marine turtles, oceanic turtles, and the sea turtle, while terms for other turtles on land and the amphibious ones would be the tortoise and terrapins. So hopefully that clarifies why we use marine turtle as the term. There's something on my screen. I don't know. Can I just do this again? Anyway, I don't know where that's coming from.
It's in Zoom.
It's in Zoom. So globally, there are 7 species of marine turtles officially found. And as you can see, they're all illustrated in front of you. They vary in sizes and in shape. So for example, the smallest one would be the olive ridley, as you can see on the right slide. And the biggest one would be the leatherback turtle. But in the Philippines, so as you can see also the leatherback turtle is longer than an average human being. Okay, it's gone. But in the Philippines, we only have 5 species out of the 7, and they're all shown in front of you. So one would be the olive ridley turtle, and I think in Ilocos Sur and in the western coast of the Philippines, would be the more common species. Then we have the hawksbill turtle. Then we have the green turtle. I would say the green turtle is the most common species in the Philippines, followed by the hawksbill. Followed by the olive ridley, then the hawksbill. And number 4 would be the loggerhead turtle. And number 5 is the leatherback turtle. So previously, we thought there were only 3 species nesting in the Philippines, which would be species 1, 2, and 3, olive, hawksbill, and green turtle. Previously, there were no confirmed records of loggerhead turtle and leatherback turtle nesting in the Philippines. But recent documentation confirmed that leatherback turtles do nest in the Philippines also. And we haven't had any record of a loggerhead turtle yet. So right now we have 4 species nesting in the Philippines. Okay, so when we talk about the different species, some find it easy to differentiate them from each other. Usually, I would say it's very difficult, and you should really look at the physical characteristics, or what we call the morphological characteristics of that animal, uh, to confirm what species we have seen or we have found. So this is important for us because both in DNR and in Marine Wildlife Watch of the Philippines, we try to collect data on marine turtle, what we call marine turtle incidents in the Philippines. Either it's nesting or a stranding or a bycatch. And usually we find that reports would have mistakes in the type of species found. So we usually require people to submit a photo also so we can verify what types of species. But I would say it's easy if you know what you are looking at. So let me introduce you some of the parts used to identify the type of turtle that is in front of you. So the turtle would have its shell at the back, which we call the carapace, and it would have the ventral or the bottom part, which we call the plastron. So usually we count the scales on the carapace, which are also called scutes. So we have something in the middle called the central or vertebral scutes, and we have scales on the side, which we call lateral or coastal scutes. And the number would vary depending on the species of turtle. So that's one part that we look at. Then we also look at the scales in the head, the ones between the eyes, and we call those prefrontal scutes or scales. In the illustration, it's colored green, and we use that to identify which species. So as an example, for example, the green turtle would have 4 lateral scutes on each side. But if you compare it to the next column, the hawksbill would also have 4 lateral scutes. But then you need to look at the prefrontal scutes or scales, because the hawksbill turtle would have 4 prefrontal scutes, and green turtle would only have a pair. So I'll show you later some illustrations that, because it will be confusing sometimes depending on the life stage of the animal. So for the other turtles, the loggerhead would have exactly 5 lateral scutes. So automatically, any species with the 5 lateral scutes would be the loggerhead turtle. The olive ridley would have more than 5. So they have like 6 up to 8 lateral scutes, and that would identify it as an olive ridley. So I hope that clarifies. Usually we just encounter the female because they're the ones going up the beach to lay eggs. The males usually show up in their feeding grounds and in the mating grounds of these turtles. So to differentiate the male from the female, the adult ones would have the different sizes of the tail or the length of the tail. So the male would have a very long tail as compared to the female. So this anatomical feature is mainly because the male would have to mate with the female when it's on top. I think I'd have a picture of that later on. So as you can see, the turtle would have different life stages. So from hatchlings to juvenile to subadult to adult. And for each life phase, the color may change or the shape of the carapace will change, but the number of scutes in the carapace and the prefrontal scutes will never change. So this is the green turtle, as I said, the most common species in the Philippines. They can grow uh, more than 1 meter in length in terms of carapace size, and they usually mature between 20 to 40 years, as shown here. So when we see turtles, they really vary in size. I'll explain to you. Um, so if you look at the illustration in front of you, you might think I'm showing you different species of marine turtles, but this would actually just be one species of marine turtle. So these are different colors, shapes, and shades of the green turtle. So it would vary. So sometimes it's difficult to identify a species just by looking at it. We actually need to count the lateral scutes and the prefrontal scutes, as I mentioned earlier. Um, so one of the things I want to emphasize here is, depending on the life stage of the animal, they would utilize different habitats, which would correspond to different food sources at different life stages. For example, it was mentioned during the quiz earlier that the green turtle are herbivorous reptiles feeding on seagrasses and red algae, which is true. So as juveniles, subadults, and adults, they are truly herbivorous. But during the earlier life stage, the hatchling and the post-hatchling phases, they are omnivorous. So they would also eat animals like jellyfish and copepods and hydroids, and even dead insects. I'm also mentioning the food source because this would dictate where to find these animals. So obviously, a green turtle, again, if they feed on seagrasses and algae, you would find them in seagrass beds. So the olive ridley I mentioned earlier would be the second most common species in the Philippines, also in terms of nesting. Very young animals, they're herbivorous, and as young animals, as you can see, they almost feed on the same things like the green turtles. But as from juveniles to adults, they would usually eat crabs and mollusks. So they are herbivorous. So the third more common species would be the hawksbill turtle. And again, as very young animals, they feed on jellyfish, copepods, sea slugs, and hydroids. But as juveniles, subadults, and adults, they tend to focus on sponges and algae. So this would also indicate the type of habitat they use. For example, sponges are mostly found in coral reefs. So we usually find the hawksbill turtle in our coral areas. Leatherback turtles would be feeding mostly on jellyfish as their main diet. And a lot of these are found in throughout the water column, so in deep waters and in shallow waters, in coastal area and pelagic area. So this would also be the habitat of the leatherback turtle. And true enough, they're the deepest diving of the marine turtles. So they can dive as deep as 1,000 meters underwater. Okay, so I would also want to emphasize that because of the choice of habitats, usually of the adult turtles, and their feeding habits, they do tend to affect the ecosystems where they are found. So for example, the green turtle, for example, would have an effect on the seagrass ecosystem. They're actually called grazers. So they, instead of finishing the seagrass meadows, they tend to cultivate it more. So they stimulate growth also in the seagrass system. And we all know that seagrass beds are also nursery ground for different types of fish and other marine organisms. So I said hawksbill turtles are found in coral reefs. So if they feed on the sponges, for example, this would give more space for corals to grow, attach themselves, and grow. So they somehow stimulate growth of corals in these areas. Leatherbacks, for example, swarms of jellyfish would eat a lot of fish fry as their prey, and keeping this jellyfish under control would be the leatherback turtle. So somehow they make sure that our fish populations are also healthy. And for olive ridley, of course, they do affect that. But for example, in areas where they do aribada, where, as mentioned earlier, hundreds and thousands of them nests at the same time on a stretch of beach, they do affect the nutrients that are available in the beach area. And you may or may not know that the beach area and the sand is also a living space for different organisms. So improving the nutrients here, especially if they deposit eggs in that area, would affect the organisms in our coastal area. So those are just examples of how marine turtles play an important role in our marine ecosystem. So usually my question is, what then if we remove these turtles from their natural habitat? Of course, they won't be able to perform or be of any benefit to the ecosystem that provide benefits to us. So I'll be introducing some concepts also about marine turtles. For example, marine turtles are known to travel thousands of kilometers from one spot to another. So this is a map that we did based on tagging records of the Department of Environment. So we sort of just mapped out what was the longest or the longest distance single marine turtle was found from in one spot, and the farthest other location it was located. So we tagged turtles in the Turtle Islands in Tawi-Tawi down there in the map. And that same turtle with the same tag and same tag number was found in Pagudpud, Ilocos Norte. So that's about 1,500 kilometers. And the hawksbill turtle that was tagged in Pangasinan was found in Surigao del Sur. And a turtle that was tagged in Leyte was found in the northern Luzon coast. So they do travel that far, but even farther because they're not limited to the Philippine seas. They do travel to other countries because they know no boundaries. So that's even farther. So turtles in the Philippines have been known to travel to Malaysia, Vietnam, and Indonesia, for example. And there may be links with populations also in Australia. So that's really, really far migration. So based on the information that I've said about migration and feeding habits and habitat use, let me show you the complex life cycle of a marine turtle, which I say is never that simple. And just give me time to explain this to you, because any conservation program focused on marine turtle would need to consider all the things that you are going to learn right now. So for example, let's start with adult turtles. You can see like a male and a female turtle in their feeding habitat. So we know that already, that it's seagrass beds for green turtle and coral reefs for hawksbill turtles. So when they are ready to mate, or when it's breeding season, they would travel to their mating habitat. And this could be hundreds and thousands of kilometers away from their feeding habitat. So the mating habitat usually is close to the nesting beaches. And So they copulate and the female becomes fertilized, ready to lay her eggs. So in one mating season, after mating, the male, as you can see with the long tail, usually goes back to their feeding habitat. Okay, again, which could be thousands of kilometers away. But the female would go to their nesting habitat, which is usually close by. The nesting habitat, and it's not only one time that the female would lay her eggs, but every 2 weeks, they're expected to lay from between 2 to 5 times, going back to the same nesting beach to lay eggs. So in the meantime that they do not join the males in the feeding habitat, they go to a place called the internesting habitat, which is also nearby. So this is a cycle, like every 2 weeks, the female would lay eggs again on the beach based on the one mating that has occurred with the male. The female, after this nesting season, would rejoin the male in the feeding habitat. So this cycle happens between 4 to 8 years. So it doesn't happen every year. So it could take up to 80 years before the same male and female turtles go back and do the mating and laying the eggs. But from the nesting beach, and this is the only time the turtles are on land, you have your hatchlings after they hatch from their eggs, and they go into their lost year habitat. Lost year because no one has actually documented where they are during this period, but we do know it's in a pelagic habitat, like it's in the middle of the ocean, in floating seaweeds. That's where they stay for protection, and that's where they eat. But when they show up after 5 to 20 years, they're about plate size, and they go into what we call now the developmental habitat. So the developmental habitat can be a feeding habitat also, but it's usually where the juvenile turtles would stay until they grow into mature adults. So which can take between 20 to 35 years for the green turtle. Phew. So I always need to catch my breath after explaining that. But to show you, it's just like a poster of the same thing. So this would be like the complete life cycle of the marine turtle. And as I said, they utilize different habitats, and their diets would change also, depending on the life stage. So when we're doing conservation programs, it's not enough to address only the nesting beach, because as I said, that's the habitat they least use or are found in. So they're mostly found in the sea, using these habitats. So when they lay on the beach, it's usually a long, arduous process, which takes about 3 hours to complete, from going up to the shore to digging up the egg pit and laying their eggs and covering this up, camouflaging it, and going back to the ocean. So it's in the Philippines, we're lucky to have one of the major rookeries globally, which is the Turtle Islands. I think one of the best years that has been documented recently would be around 2011, where over 1 million eggs were recorded being laid on the Turtle Islands in 1 year, in 2011, I think. So it's a major important site in the Philippines for marine turtle. And true enough, it's a under our NIPAS sites or our protected areas. It's called the Turtle Islands Wildlife Sanctuary. It's very close to Malaysia, so we are working closely also with the Turtle Islands National Park in Malaysia. We've also tried to establish important areas for different species of marine turtles in the Philippines based on reports submitted to the DNR. So these are important nesting beaches throughout the Philippines. So we made like a point system to prioritize sites for the different species. So the green turtle is widely distributed throughout the country, and I would say they would tend to nest on each and every island in the Philippines. The olive ridley are the next most numerous nesters, but they tend to focus on specific areas. As I said, in the western Philippine coast and Manila Bay, that's usually the area for olive ridley, and also southern Mindanao. The hawksbill is kind of sporadic, showing up in different parts of the Philippines for nesting. So, but the nesting beach is also different from the feeding habitat. So, as divers, for example, we usually find them doing their thing in their feeding habitat. So one of the concepts also I want to introduce will be natal homing. Mentioned earlier is when the hatchlings grow up, they do tend to go back to their nesting beaches to lay eggs, and this is because they have this natal homing, and it is theorized that they use like the magnetic field of the earth to navigate the oceans. And even if they move far away into the developmental and feeding habitats away from their nesting beaches, as adults, they would be able to go back to where they were born. And this is the theory of how they do natal homing. When we talk to fishing communities, they always mention to us that the female turtle would cry when they lay eggs, or when they are caught in nets, they would cry because they're in pain, or laying eggs would cause them pain, or when they lay eggs, they leave their young ones, so they cry because it's a sad thing for a mother to leave their young. It's okay to believe in those, but the turtles would not cry because of emotional reasons. When we see tears coming out of the eye, it's actually the way for marine turtles to excrete excess salts from their body. So they live in the ocean. So they do have a kidney also, and usually it's difficult to filter out all the salts that they take in with their food through just their kidney. So they have a special gland, as you can see here in the head. They have salt glands which extracts the excess salts and are excreted through the mucus that comes out of the eye as well. So they constantly do this even underwater. It's certainly obvious when they're out of the water in the sand. So emergence, when the hatchlings hatch from the egg and crawl up the sand, is also somehow a complex process. So when they hatch, they don't automatically go up the sand. So it can take 3 to 5 days before they actually come out of the surface of the sand. So sometimes they wait for more eggs to hatch. Marine turtles or hatchlings tend to go to the shore en masse because it's a sort of survival way for them, because the more hatchlings there are, the more confused the predators will be in eating all of them. So if you just have one hatchling, a predator would easily prey on that single hatchling. But if you find like 100 hatchlings on the beach, then maybe 99 of those would reach the water. So I'm saying it could take 3 to 5 days before they go up the sand is because some practitioners who have hatcheries, they tend to dig up the nest as soon as they find a hatchling going up the sand. But we should do this maybe 3 to 5 days after the first emergence because some of the eggs will not be hatched yet. After they emerge, the main cue that they use would be light. So emergence usually happens at night and they tend to move towards the ocean because the horizon in the ocean is usually brighter than the forest that you have behind the beach. So usually it's vegetation you find behind the sand. So that's dark. So the hatchlings would always tend to go to the brighter area, which is the sea. But as you can see, they also use different cues or environmental parameters to give them direction in their navigation. So again, on the beach, they use light. When they get into the water immediately, they tend to swim perpendicular to the waves. And when they're in the deeper water, again, they use the magnetic field of the earth for their orientation. So they use different methods in navigation. So which is a big problem for hatchlings when you have a lot of artificial light because they would in like houses and street lightings and in roads where you have vehicles, the hatchlings would be attracted to the light, those artificial light, which is brighter than your moonlight in the horizon. That's why for wildlife, for example, light pollution is becoming a bigger issue. So another concept that I want to introduce to you is the infantile frenzy. So as you notice, the hatchlings, as soon as they emerge, para silang kitikite. So they move very fast. I'll show you. There should be a video here. So that video is not sped up. That's really how they move. So this is because they have reserved the yolk from the egg. And this yolk is which gives them energy. And this energy is needed by them so that they can move quickly on sand as to evade a lot of predators and also in the coral area where a lot of big fish would live. They are easy prey to that. So they can move easily through those treacherous habitats. And again, to go to the lost tier habitat. So they need to reach that in less than a week. So they need to be somewhere pelagic out in the open ocean in less than 5 days. And this energy is the one that drives them to swim quickly to those areas. So even, yeah, but there's a problem with marine turtles, even if we have a lot of eggs and eggs produce, as I didn't mention it already, but there can be like 100 eggs per clutch, and therefore you get like 100 hatchlings or more going to the ocean, but less than 1% would survive into adulthood. And that's because they're succumb to predation and a lot of natural mortalities. So out of 100, only one would survive. That's why we're very careful in how to handle marine turtles, especially hatchlings. So one of the mistake or wrong practices we've seen in different areas in the Philippines is we put hatchlings in a basin of water. The proper way is to release them naturally and immediately within the first hour after emergence, because their behavior tends to change already after an hour. And if you put them in a basin of water, the yolk sac and the energy that they have reserved to take them to the pelagic habitat will just be wasted. They'll just be swimming around and around without reaching any distance within the palanganan or the basin. So it's a waste of their energy, and they wouldn't have enough energy anymore to go to the pelagic habitat once we release them. So the best way is to release them immediately, usually within the first hour. There are, of course, a lot of other problems. One is coastal development. So one was mentioned earlier about light pollution, but also coastal development. So, for example, typically 30 years ago, these were the hatchlings that were born, for example, in La Union. But maybe in some areas, 30 years later, this is the sort of development that happened in the coastal area. So as adults, when they go back to the nesting beaches, those hatchlings would find a wall and not their nesting beach anymore. So these would deter any further nestings. So again, light pollution is becoming an issue. There are a lot of movements in different countries, especially in Australia and the United States. In Florida, they have committed to reduce light and use the proper light, for example, especially during the nesting season. So it does not affect one, disturb the nesting female, and also affect how the hatchlings find their way to the ocean. But again, those are not the only threats. There are so many other threats. And I think Project Blue Ilocos is focusing on waste management. One of the bigger problems of marine turtles, of course, would we still hunt them. In a lot of places in the Philippines, we turn them into turtle stew. The eggs are still being collected because it's mentioned that they're good as aphrodisiacs. A lot of useless products, I would say, like call them dust gatherers. We use the scales or the scutes because they're beautiful to turn them into trinkets and other decorative items for our home. We found this turtle. It was still alive. It's a hawksbill turtle, but the scales were removed already from the carapace because it was going to be traded. The Philippines is considered one of the trade routes in, for example, the Coral Triangle. Aside from the one who would poach, a lot of poaching is happening in the Philippines because there's a market for that, usually to China. It goes through Palawan, but we've seen a lot of areas in the Philippines where this happens also. But a lot of it is happening in the Turtle Islands again, in Tawi-Tawi and in Palawan. So we're part of an international trade route to China for marine turtle products. And that's why we get pictures such as this Vietnamese vessel harvesting marine turtles in Tawi-Tawi. Or eggs are still being traditionally eaten in the Turtle Islands, and it's illegal to harvest them in the Philippines, but they do get smuggled to Malaysia. So it's also illegal in Malaysia, but most of the smuggled turtle eggs that are found there came from the Philippines. So these are like 3,000 turtle eggs. So that's coming from 300 nests, right? So from 300 nesting females. There are other threats, for example, ghost fishing, like discarded nets in the ocean is becoming a problem, of course. Bycatch or active nets in the water are also catching marine turtles. We're finding out that in the Western Philippine Sea, this can be a major problem because most of the reports are actually from fishery interaction and bycatch. Already mentioned earlier that temperature would play an important role in determining or how a hatchling would develop their sex. So the higher the temperature, which is usually about 28 degrees Celsius, the more females will be produced. So I'm mentioning this because of the issue of climate change would be affecting not only the nesting beaches, for example, which will be flooded, which will be underwater in a few decades, but also the sex of the hatchlings, the food sources of different turtles. So it will affect them in all life stages and in all habitats that they use, usually in the negative sense. So one of the things we're looking at the mouth of a leatherback turtle. So this is the same for a lot of marine turtle species. They would have this papillae, which are spiny, hard structures in the esophagus of the turtle, which helps them feed. Because usually, for example, the hawksbill, the leatherback turtle, when they feed, they would engulf a lot of water so that they can take in the jellyfish, for example, and they would expel the water, and the papillae would ensure that all the jellyfish would remain in the stomach and the esophagus is not spitted out. So the problem now is when they take in the jellyfish, they also take in a huge amount of plastic trash also. So it's almost impossible for these turtles to rid of the plastic with the water if they are swallowed. So because of the different threats, a lot of population of marine turtles are threatened throughout the world. So in our area, Southeast Asia, the hawksbill would be the most threatened species. Although all the species mentioned present in the Philippines are protected in the country, the green turtle, the loggerhead turtle, and the olive ridley turtle are considered endangered species under the Wildlife Act, while the leatherback turtle and the hawksbill turtle are considered critically endangered in the Philippines. So one aspect I would like to talk about also would be tourism. So I've mapped out different marine wildlife tourism sites in the country. So you can see we have an array from marine turtles to manta rays to thresher sharks to dolphin watching sites. We have them throughout the Philippines. So it's very exciting. It's one of the things we're promoting because it supports livelihood in coastal communities, etc. But tourism is a problem now because of the pandemic. But we're gearing up again to open tourism sites. And as I said, we have several in the Philippines that are focusing on marine turtles, mostly again in the feeding habitat of these marine turtles. So the practices that you see here, standing on marine turtles, catching them and putting them in captivity, for example, are all wrong. They're actually all illegal. So we don't encourage those. And we're actually promoting guidelines on how to interact during tourism activities with marine turtles, with distances, with how many people. These are all written in a new law. It's called the Joint Memorandum Circular by the Department of Tourism, giving us guidelines on how to interact with marine turtles. You can Google that, the Joint Memorandum Circular, to know more about the restrictions. Of course, we're encouraging responsible tourism, and this is just part of it. There's many information online. Marine Wildlife Watch is working on a program called Pawikan Watch PH, and we're encouraging you as a tourist to be more responsible with some of the things you've learned today. So we can find this in our website, in areas that are nesting beaches and are feeding habitats where we find these marine turtles. If you're a resort owner or if you run a business there that do tours for marine turtles as well, snorkeling tours, scuba diving, there are many ways also where you can help becoming responsible managers. And if you're a community in that area, if you're the fisher folk community living in that area, or just residents, and you find marine turtles in your area, there are so many ways for you to help. So I'm not mentioning anymore the details of this, but you can find this in our website of Marine Wildlife Watch of the Philippines. And we do also provide technical support to anyone who encounters a turtle that would need help. So we respond to a lot of stranding and turtles being caught in nets. So to make it easy for everyone, we do have manuals, different manuals for marine mammals, for sharks and rays, and of course, marine turtles, which are available for download at our website, free download. So, and we give you all the option what you can do, like a decision tree, what to do, depending on the life stage or what problem you have for the turtle. Our Facebook page also is monitoring through whatever is posted online about what's happening with different marine wildlife in the Philippines, which sometimes is important. For example, in Misamis Oriental, we just found these are mating turtles. So this is the illustration that I'm showing you. So we have very limited information on mating grounds here in the Philippines, but now I know, like hawksbill do mate in Misamis Oriental because someone posted a video of it. Of course, we're documenting a lot of threats. If you do report to us, make sure you have all this information that you see on the screen. The species, again, I taught you how to identify the species and all the other information needed so we can make a proper report, and it can be part of our database. So for example, our database, this map shows which regions in the Philippines is the most enthusiastic in posting on Facebook about their encounter with marine turtles. So apparently the Visayas region and southern Luzon is posting a lot, more than 40 reports in, I think, in the span of 5 years, and the western Philippines is about mid. You need to take more selfies and pictures of what's going on and post it online. We do harvest that information. It becomes useful in management. So all of this, there are some organizations, for example, Large Marine Vertebrate Research Institute of the Philippines. They even have a citizen science research program where you're asked to take a photo of a turtle in a specific way, and you can submit it to them. It becomes part of their database. So monitoring usually marine turtles in their feeding and developmental habitat. So if you have any of those photos, do submit to them. So to close this talk, I think I'm severely over time. I'd like to leave you a video of a leatherback turtle that we've encountered in the Bicol region. So let me just start this video. All right. So that ends my presentation. Sorry, I went over time, but hopefully you learned a lot and uh, use what you've learned today to help marine turtles in the Philippines and in your area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that presentation. Grabe, ang dami kong natutunan. As
Sorry,
someone,
overtime.
okay, it's okay lang po. Marami naman po kaming natutunan, sir. And as someone who truly cares for the environment, to be honest, napaka-onti lang yung alam ko about the turtles. And this is a really great opportunity. And it's really a privilege na malaman yung about these animals. And I know you have many questions for Dr. AA. And I also want to share na grabe yung mga turtles, ang tagal na nilang nabubuhay. There are turtles talaga who live no the same like as a dinosaur doon. Pero yung mga papatay lang sa kanila is yung mga marine debris, yung mga plastics. And it's really sad. Kasi syempre tayo yung may pakana doon, mga plastics, ganyan. So, this webinar talaga made me more conscious on my actions kasi kahit na, ayan, parang simpleng plastic lang yan, pero it can affect the turtles. So, ayan po, thank you, Sir AA, for giving that wonderful presentation and informative talk.
You're
We
welcome.
know you have many questions po for Dr. AA, but before we proceed to the panel discussion, let us watch these wonderful videos prepared by our partners. And you may prepare your questions in the meantime and send them here at www.menti.com using the code 84684596, which will be sent to the chat box below. Also, please wait until the end of the event for the evaluation form so that you can receive your certificate of participation. So let's watch na yung mga videos. Thank you.
As a student, you will face challenges where you will be overwhelmed, fail, doubt yourself, and lose confidence in what you're doing. These struggles cannot be handled alone. You will need assistance, guidance, and interaction to learn and relay knowledge to prepare yourself better for the future.
That is why here in Technological Improvement for New and Keen Engineering Students, also known as SEGA Thinkers, we commit ourselves to develop civil and geological engineering students and shape them in applying this knowledge in solving real-life situations. It is a community where we share our technical expertise to provide the deserved quality of life that every Filipino community should have. SEGA Thinkers not only caters to the SEGA students of the Mapua University, but we also involve ourselves in the whole institution to encourage quality engineering education.
We will walk with you as you face your endeavors in discovering and creating an effective solution to the local, national, and international problems, issues, and concerns. Not only that, the SEGA Thinkers also acts as a family and knows the importance of human interaction as to why we engage in social involvement like games with lots of prizes included. As part of this institution, we will make a difference in the future of our world, earn honor by thinking, and shall provide knowledge by doing.
As a student, you
My destination is to become a licensed civil engineer and to be able to help out my family.
My destination is to become a licensed civil engineer.
My destination is to become an engineer for sustainability.
My destination is to become a successful civil and environmental and sanitary engineer.
My destination is to become successful as a structural or transportation engineer.
My destination is to become a transportation engineer in Japan.
My destination is to be a licensed sanitary engineer of Malolo City and to help out my family.
My destination is to become a licensed engineer and to travel around the world.
My destination is to have a successful career in construction.
My destination.
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 Hi, welcome to the island. We're Mission Isla. By the year 2050, there will be over 1 billion climate refugees, and many of these people will come from the Philippines. As a reaction to this statistic, Mission Isla was born. So what exactly is Mission Isla? Mission Isla is a non-profit youth organization centered on creating climate change solutions for developing island nations in Asia Pacific. Our aim is to create local solutions and use them for global action. We do this by focusing on 5 key points. 1. Climate change and biodiversity loss. It's no secret that the Philippines is a melting pot for so many different species. Climate change threatens all of those species, not just us. 2. Decolonizing environmental education and making it accessible to everyone and supporting grassroots projects. The environmental education we have today is made up of whitewashed things our ancestors have always known and lived by. 3. Indigenous peoples' rights and international laws. Indigenous peoples have always been the Earth's staunchest defenders. We owe it to the environment to defend its protectors. 4. Climate change's threats to human health. Climate change is a health hazard. It's not just the Earth getting sick from various pollutants and bacteria released from melting ice caps. People get sick too. And lastly, point number 5, circularity and responsible consumption and production. It's common knowledge that our consumption and production habits have to change, but this can only be achieved at the fastest rate through adopting a circular economic model. What we produce should eventually go back to the environment without causing any harm to it. Mission Isla was created by 7 young people for the 7,000 and beyond. We can save 1 billion people from becoming climate refugees by saving today.
So civil engineering and environmental and sanitary engineering are pillars of sustainable development goals.
Let's not stop in improving ourselves. So that's how we excel. We learn from our mistakes, and that's the way towards excellence.
We deserve to be an EDSE. Why? Because every day we are encountering environmental science. Every day you are encountering environmental problems, and as EDSE, you will be responsible. You will be the engineer that solves this problem.
Hi everyone, Roria Senior here, the founder and head of Tree Book Project. Tree Book Project was established in April just this year, and currently we are composed of more than 40 youth members who are striving to work on our environmental advocacies on education and information dissemination, as well as reforestation through the use of native species. We use the engagements on our Facebook page to generate a specific number of trees, such as number of reacts, comments, and shares. From May to August alone, we have already generated a total of more than 1,000 trees. And last August 27, we have conducted our first tree planting activity. However, due to the limited manpower and health restrictions, we were only able to plant 100. So by October this year, we are planning to conduct another activity to plant the remaining 900 trees. Yearbook Project aims to continuously improve our system, to expand our network, and conduct more projects that will further environmental advocacies. So if you want to connect with us, you may simply send us a message on our Facebook page, or you may simply DM me. So that is all about Yearbook Project. Thank you.
Wow! So, ang daming mga orgs, guys, na pinakita, and I hope you are inspired talaga to join. There are so many ways to really help the environment, and these organizations can help you talaga to become a better environmental advocate. Again, we would like to thank everyone who made this webinar possible. This webinar is co-presented by Sega Thinkers, Earthshaker PH, Eastern Asia Society for Transportation Studies, Transportation Science Society of the Philippines, Mapua Student Chapter, International Construction Project Management Association, Mapua Student Chapter, League of Young Catalysts, Project Biodiverse Citizen, and SIDHI.
We would also like to announce that PBI is accepting new ambassadors and volunteers. The application period starts today until Wednesday, November 10th. The open committees are internal secretary, internals research, and creatives. So if you're interested, you may apply through bit.ly/PBI-REC2021. Or you could also scan the QR code that is sent that you could see on your screen right now. The link for the application is also sent through the chat box.
Now for our Q&A. So start na tayo guys sa Q&A para masagot natin yung mga questions niya about the turtles and Dr. AA. Yan. Okay. So, for our first question, meron na ba? Yan. So, nasa screen yung question natin. So, what are your thoughts po daw about Bataan Sea turtle tourism with their hatchling release?
I'm not sure what their practices are. Is this a private initiative or DNR?
I'm also not sure, sir.
Kasi if it's DNR, they would be following what's written in the manual that I showed you earlier, and that would follow guidelines like immediate release of the hatchlings. So I don't know what they mean by the Bataan Sea turtle tourism. if they're keeping the hatchlings in a basin for tourists to release, they would need to follow the joint management circular that I mentioned earlier, which is a new law. So maybe they haven't seen it yet.
If
So I
ever the
suggest that you read it.
Oh, sorry, sir. If ever the participant is still in the Zoom session, whoever asked that question, please feel free to clarify your question in the chat box so that Dr. AA could answer it for you. Okay, so Wilhelm Tan was the one who asked the question. He said they keep sea turtles in a basin for tourism to release later. I think it's because you mentioned po, Dr. AA, that if the sea turtles are kept in a basin an hour after they hatch, their energy will be lost.
Yes, it will be reduced and it will be difficult for them to go to their pelagic habitat. The tourism activity, meaning swimming with the marine turtles in their feeding habitat. I think that's what, if done properly, again, we have the guidelines, then it wouldn't be a problem. Because if you follow the guidelines, the disturbance will be zero or minimal. So as long as they follow the guidelines, then it won't disrupt the natural life of the turtle. So migration, of course, is a challenge in conservation. For example, if one country has a stronger protection and conservation program, for example, in the Philippines, and if it migrates to another country where they're being eaten, then that's one of the main challenges, I think, for marine turtle.
Thank you, sir. So, ayun guys, yun yung sagot sa tanong. Pag may nakita na kayong mali sa ginagawa, you can always report it. So, next, Amber.
So the next question is about leatherback sea turtle nesting. What happened to the eggs? Is it possible that female leatherback made a mistake laying in the Philippines?
I think historically we're in the range of where they could be nesting. There just wasn't any proper documentation. And in science kasi, di ba, you need like evidence and proof that they've been nesting. So apparently, like over the some decades before, there weren't any proper documentation. But when Facebook came into play and when everyone's taking pictures using their phones, we did get a proper documentation already. So I think it was a matter of proper documentation.
Thank you so much po, Dr. AA, for clarifying that one. Next question, please.
Okay, for the next question, I am wondering why there are no flatback sea turtle in the Philippines, especially since the range of these turtles are very near to the Philippines.
So different species would have different requirements in terms of habitats and again migration. So in the Philippines, they're not present because it's also a factor, for example, of population. So we have populations that are genetically distinct, for example, and usually this genetic distinction is limited geographically. So it can be within a species. So for example, the Philippines would share the same population with Malaysia of green turtles, but it can also be among just different species. So we're just not one habitat for the flatback turtle, and two, genetically they're just not present in the waters around us, and they're just limited in that area in Australia, for example.
Thank you, sir. So, ayun guys, pag yung species, they have their respective requirements para mag-survive sila. So for the next question po,
The next question is, how long does it take for the turtles to travel from the southern part of the country to the northern part? Like what you mentioned in your discussion earlier po.
Sige. So usually this, like, they're not traveling like a dart, like a direct path towards that destination. But the turtle, for example, would, between its nesting ground, for example, the green turtle that I mentioned earlier, traveling 1,500 kilometers from the Turtle Islands, which is the nesting ground. It traveled to Ilocos Norte, which is probably the feeding ground. So when they do travel that part, it's not like a direct path. So it might take months for them to do that. So it's not like they're driving and going through a road. So they usually go through the eastern coast of Palawan, like near the coast. Then from there, we don't know if they cross directly to Luzon or do a loop in the West Philippine Sea and end up in Ilocos. Probably they're staying close to the shore. I'm looking at the data also in the Western Philippines, like in the Ilocos coast, and you do get a lot of bycatch or green turtles. So maybe that's part of their either feeding habitat or migratory route. And obviously, some of them are coming from the Turtle Islands where they nest.
Thank you po, sir. I hope that answered your question. Next, we have this one. Would you like to take this one, Luhan?
sure. So yung next question po is, do turtles come back to the nest on the same beach they were hatched?
Not specifically on the same beach. I would say the same, like if you have like several islands and one of the beaches in one of the islands is where they can like choose from the other islands as well. Or if you have different pocket beaches in the same coast, they can opt to use any of those beaches. But I would say it's the same general area where they were born, and they would come back to nest in one of those beaches.
Thank you, sir. So, hindi naman daw sobrang specific, like general area lang. Okay, for the next question po.
Next question is, do you think the government of the Philippines effectively executes the conservation efforts suggested or presented by institutions and organizations?
Someone wants to get me into trouble. Well, I, for one, also work for the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And I think we have the proper laws and the proper programs. And we do have very dedicated people in our government also who wants to see marine turtles effectively protected and conserved. But in the end, it's always a collective effort. Philippine government, national and line agencies, local governments, NGOs, everything that we do, we tend to do in collaboration with the government and help them achieve their targets also. It's not enough always, but I think everyone is somehow doing their best. So hopefully we'll get to, there's no perfect level of doing that. And as you know, conservation is not just a bunch of activities and programs. It's about how you live, sustainability, etc. So it's all of us taking part in that to make sure marine turtles are conserved, or biodiversity in the Philippines is conserved properly.
Okay, for the next po, I am an environmental biology student interested in how coral bleaching affects the turtle population as of date and how largely it has damaged the Philippine seas.
We sort of don't have any data relating coral bleaching to marine turtles. But for marine turtles who would use our coral areas for their habitat, for example, the hawksbill turtle, any effect of the bleaching on, for example, on the sponges growing in that area. I know, like, if a area is affected by coral bleaching, they'll just be smothered by algae later on, which would inhibit the growth of any other organisms like corals and sponges, etc. So I think, in the sense of one providing shelter for these animals, the corals tend to be brittle also, right? Like, if they die, so they'll just become rubble in the end. So there's no protection for our species. So again, if it affects their food source, they won't be able to feed, right? So for the effect of coral bleaching in the Philippine seas, that's another organization called Reef Check.
Next question po, the second to the last question rather, is with the dilemma about turtles and turtle egg poaching, as well as the limited approach to these acts, does PENR have future prospects for heavier consequences for poachers, such as reclusion or perpetua?
Which I wouldn't know what that means. But right now, the Wildlife Act is being amended as we speak. So some of the provisions there, particularly penalties, etc., and other activities that might affect or are harmful to our biodiversity, will be there. So right now, again, the Wildlife Act is being revised. It's now in Senate, and as soon as that passes, we'll have stronger laws and protection for marine turtles. So let's just wait for that. Again, implementation, after we have that all the right provisions and the right laws. Implementation, it's another story, and it will be a challenge, definitely.
Okay, last question na po, sir. What are your thoughts po of Bataan sea turtle tourism with their hatchling release?
It's the same question like the first. It's the first question.
Okay. Ito pala yung first.
Which we already answered. Yeah.
Okay, so eto na lang po, sir. Why do you think sea turtles po yung common icon of the marine, environmental, and wildlife protection campaigns instead of other animals like whales, sharks, corals, etc.?
I really don't know. Like, as an organization, Marine Wildlife Watch of the Philippines, we tend to look at the different marine wildlife equally. And in the broader sense of ecology, if we look at all the marine species and marine biodiversity, we should not be prioritizing some of the species over the others. So, for example, I was even thinking of maybe we should launch a campaign to conserve our plankton, because they're the basic ingredients and the basis of all life in the ocean and the oxygen that we breathe, and no one is focusing usually any conservation efforts on them. And I think we tend to focus on big, charismatic animals, and somehow it's the proper thing to do because all these species are actually threatened and protected in the Philippines. But maybe particularly the turtles, because they're super cute If you encounter them, the hatchlings are very cute. And the proximity of people to these animals because they are on the beach. People use the beach. So compared to the other animals, I think because we always get to interact with the marine turtle, it's more convenient for us to use the turtle. But I'm not complaining.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for clarifying that. Kasi ako personally, di ko rin alam kung bakit yung turtles yung main character, kumbaga, when it comes to saving the oceans.
Kasi nga people are more familiar with it. Like for sharks, usually just the divers are involved in shark appreciation. Dolphin watching, you would need to go on a boat. So if you're not a heavy traveler, usually you wouldn't encounter these animals.
Yeah, and I guess what greatly contributed then for the turtles to be one of the faces of the anti-plastic movement would be the infamous video that's circulating in the internet wherein there's a straw stuck in a turtle's nose and they were extracting it. And I think that was one of the catalysts that made people start, reducing their plastic, advocating for the environment, and saying no to single-use plastics such as straws and spoon and forks from fast food restaurants.
Yeah, go
So
turtle.
yeah. So again, thank you so much, Dr. AA, for enlightening us and informing us about all these information about sea turtles. And once again,
You're very
thank you,
welcome.
thank
Thank you
you
for
so
having
much,
me.
po. So that's the end of our Q&A. And as we end this event, we would like to present this certificate of appreciation for Dr. Arnel AA Yaptinchai for his phenomenal presentation as speaker for Sea Sessions, The Humble Turtle, organized by Project Blue Ilocos, held on November 6, 2021. Signed by PBI's founder, Mr. Adam Inovejas, and this webinar's project head, Ms. Samantha Viola Ferrer. Again, on behalf of the organizing team of the Project Blue Ilocos and for everyone here in the Zoom session, thank you so much, Dr. AA.
We learned a lot from you, and we're sure that everyone here has realized the importance of sea turtles too. For the closing remarks, may we again call on Mr. Adam Inovejas, founder of Project Blue Ilocos, for his closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Luhan, and our host. So, once again, I thank each and every one of you guys for coming here and attending our webinar. So, I hope that as much as I learned from Dr. AA, I hope that you guys learned so much from him as well. And maybe if you aren't still environmental advocates, maybe this is your first day. And I hope that you get to call your friends, your family, to come and join us as we advocate for the environment, as climate change really is the biggest problem we're facing as humans today. And once again, I would like to thank Dr. A. Yaptinchai for accepting our invitation to be the speaker for day 2 of C sessions. And I think that ends everything. You may tune in on our social medias for more webinars in the future, if ever, and for our projects. And of course, you may find the recording of this webinar in our Facebook page in the FB Live. So I think that concludes this webinar. I think I'll give it back to the hosts.
Thank you so much, Adam. And thank you everyone for attending PBI's second webinar, Sea Sessions, The Humble Turtle. Before we officially end the program and start getting our snacks, may we invite everyone to turn on their cameras for a very quick photo opportunity with our esteemed speaker. So can one of the tech team open their mics and cue us for the photo op?
Hi guys, lahat po ba naka-open na yung cam? Okay, ready ka na ba, Ralph? Take a screenshot.
Ready na ready.
Okay, at the count of 3 ha. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, isa pa ulit. One, two, three, smile.
Three more.
Okay na ba, Ralph? Or
Isa pa.
isa pa?
1, 2, 3. Last two pages.
Waki.
1, 2, 3. Last page.
1, 2, 3, smile.
Okay na.
Okay, thank you so much po.
Thank you po. So lastly, please answer this evaluation form shown on your screens or access the link sent in the chat box to receive your e-certificates. So yan po yung link. This event would not be possible without PBI's volunteers and partners. And this webinar is in cooperation with Mapua Philippine Institute of Civil Engineers, Mapua Philippine Society of Sanitary Engineers, Mission Isla, Movement Against Plastic Pollution, Ilocos Norte, Souls Winner PH, Three Book Project, and this is co-presented by Sega Thinkers, Earthshaker PH, Eastern Asia Society for Transportation Studies, Transportation Science Society of the Philippines, Mapua Student Chapter, International Construction Project Management Association, Mapua Student Chapter, League of Young Catalysts, Project Biodiversity, and SIDHE. Thank you once again and stay safe always.
Sorry, this form is not working. Are you aware that the form is not working?
We're fixing it right now, sir. Thank you so much. Once again, thank you so much, participants. You please just wait for the evaluation form to be fixed, and we'll update you on that. And of course, thank you so much, Dr. AA, once again for being here.
Thank you so much. Can I wait for your eval in your Facebook page instead? Thank you. Your eval.
Evaluation. Ano meron, Noel? What do you need?
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye po. Bye, friends. Thank you, sir. Sir AA, Dr. AA. Bye, friends.
Hi guys, the link's okay na. Please check it out and please chat us if hindi pa rin gumagana. Thank you so much, guys, and please answer, and we hope to see you soon again.
Naayos na po yung link. Try again the link po. Thank you.